According to the law, any individual regularly living in Hong Kong for over 7 years should be counted as a Hong Kong citizen and should be granted permanent residency. In Hong Kong, a city where it promotes equality of all races or any sex, this includes people who work in Hong Kong coming from another country. So why should these domestic helpers be excluded? Good morning. Today's motion is, this House believes that the foreign domestic helpers should be granted permanent residency in Hong Kong. As I've mentioned, when people are supposed to be treated fairly, all domestic helpers staying in Hong Kong for over 7 years should be granted permanent residency in Hong Kong as well. In the following sessions, my teammates, colonists Cici, Crystal, and Eva, will further explore this topic on the aspects of discrimination, which is the differences of the offers received by foreign professionals and foreign domestic helpers. Meanwhile, do you still remember there is a talent scheme of Hong Kong government welcoming professionals from overseas to stay in Hong Kong and to be a permanent Hong Kong citizen? The second point of us is that equality. Equality, which means that with equal contribution to our citizens and to our city, why should these domestic helpers be exempted to be granted permanent residency? When we disagree or go against this trend, actually, we are seriously affecting Hong Kong's reputation as an international city. Therefore, we today believe that foreign domestic helpers staying in Hong Kong for over 7 years should be granted permanent residency.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. In the past months, there have been 3 foreign domestic helper lawsuits. The issue of whether or not the right of the vote should be granted to foreign domestic helpers has raised heated debates in Hong Kong. According to government official figures, currently there are 290,000 foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong, in which 48% are from the Philippines, 49.4% from Indonesia, 1.3% from Thailand, and 1.7% from other places, namely Cambodia and Malaysia. At least 125,000 of the whole foreign domestic helpers population have already been working in Hong Kong for more than 7 years or more. The Foreign Domestic Helper Organization has pointed out that not all the foreign domestic helpers plan to stay in Hong Kong permanently, but only half of them may apply. But the number of 60,000 already could not be overlooked. As long as the lawsuit remains unsettled, the number of people having lived 7 years in Hong Kong will keep rising. Today's motion, this House believes that the foreign domestic helpers should be granted permanent residency in Hong Kong must not stand. By definition of the immigration ordinance, foreign domestic helpers who are not residents of China, Macau, or Taiwan are employed in Hong Kong under a standard 2-year employment contract, which specifies that their duty is to help domestic work. But they are silent with regards to the residency in the Hong Kong SAR. The Hong Kong SAR government, in various publications for the foreign domestic helpers, such as the Hong Kong Home Office Bureau's publication called Your Guide to Services in Hong Kong, has made it very clear that foreign domestic helpers must leave the Hong Kong SAR within 2 weeks of the termination of their contracts, and they are not considered permanent residents. Foreign domestic helpers, they seem to be eligible for the first criteria in the immigration ordinance, that they are non-Chinese who has entered Hong Kong with a valid travel document. However, in section 2, bracket 4A, bracket 6 of the ordinance, it is specified that they are denied from being regarded as the ordinary resident in the Hong Kong SAR. And it says, for the purpose of this ordinance, a person shall not be treated as the ordinary resident in Hong Kong during any period in which he remains in Hong Kong while employed as a domestic helper who is from outside Hong Kong. Therefore, the immigration ordinance has clearly stated that they are not ordinary residents, regardless of how many years they have been working continuously in the territory. It is regarded that the foreign domestic helpers will not take Hong Kong as their place of permanent residence and shall return to their homeland after the end of their contract. Our team will further elaborate on our standpoint. Our first speaker, Miu Miu, will mention about the non-discriminate job nature. We regard that both foreign professionals and domestic helpers, they are different. And the immigration of the foreign domestic helper will induce fierce competition of low-skilled jobs. They may change jobs after, if they are granted with the right of the vote, to become salesperson and waitress, etc., as they have high opportunity to employ with their better English proficiency. Next, our second speaker, Gloria, will elaborate on the scarcity of the Hong Kong resources in terms of housing, education, and social welfare. Our first speaker, Noah, will continue to elaborate that there has already been a problem for the waiting list to get into the public housing estate. Almost 31% of the Hong Kong poor people already live in a public house, and they want to get into better housing estates, and yet they still need to wait for 1.8 years. So here I would like to raise the question. On top of the scarcity of our Hong Kong government resources, how would you suggest the government to alleviate the burden that will be given if the foreign domestic helpers granted the right of the vote? Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this House believes that foreign domestic helpers should be granted permanent residency in Hong Kong. On behalf of the affirmative team, I strongly support the motion. Regarding the reasons raised by the first speaker of the negative team, I have a few points to make. The first speaker of the negative side said that there would be effects in the economic aspect if the foreign domestic helpers are granted permanent residency. Firstly, foreign domestic helpers of higher English level may take away jobs from the locals. But this is not likely to be the situation, since generally the English level of the foreign domestic helpers is lower than the locals. According to the University of Hong Kong's Journalism and Media Studies Center, the average English level of Filipino maids, who are the majority of the foreign domestic helpers in Hong Kong, is junior college or high school. The first speaker of the negative team also mentioned an effect in social aspect, which is the lack of resources and the uneven distribution of resources if a foreign domestic helper is granted the permanent residentship. But as he has mentioned, only a half of the foreign domestic helpers have decided to apply for the permanent residentship. And even if at last all of them apply for the permanent residentship, they still have to go through the application and selection process by the immigration department. Whether or not they are granted the permanent residentship depends on the government's code. No one can make early judgment like now. Now it comes to the reason why we, the affirmative team, are in favor of the motion. We believe that the act the act of opposing the permanent residency of foreign domestic helpers can be regarded as a discrimination towards their job nature. Let me illustrate with an example. According to a basic law, everyone who has lived in Hong Kong continuously for 7 years and regularly is qualified to apply for being a permanent resident. And actually, many NET teachers have applied for being a permanent resident and their application is accepted. In that case, why are professionals like NET teachers granted permanent residency but foreign domestic helpers are not? Apparently, this is kind of discrimination, a discrimination towards their job nature, which should not happen in such a free and open society like Hong Kong. In fact, according to the Education Bureau, NET teachers have different kinds of subsidy, including recruitment subsidy, retention incentive, special allowance rate, passage allowance, baggage allowance, special allowance, medical allowance, and housing allowance. When NET teachers in Hong Kong get high salary and different kinds of subsidy, in total up to at least 30,000 Hong Kong dollars a month, while foreign domestic helpers only get less than 5,000 Hong Kong dollars a month, why are NET teachers granted permanent residency but not foreign domestic helpers? Is it because NET teachers are skilled, but foreign domestic helpers are unskilled? NET teachers only teach Hong Kong students at school, but foreign domestic helpers take care of not only the student, but his or her whole family all the time at home. When NET teachers and foreign domestic helpers both contribute to the well-being of Hong Kong mentally and physically respectively, why only NET teachers are granted permanent residency? For this reason, we're in favor of the motion foreign domestic helpers should be granted permanent residency in Hong Kong. Thank you.
Hello everyone. Today our side does not support granting foreign domestic helpers permanent residency in Hong Kong. The reason behind is not because of the discrimination of the foreign domestic workers or their job nature. It is because we think that granting them permanent residency will simply cause too many economic problems in our Hong Kong society. We do not downplay the contribution of the foreign domestic workers in Hong Kong. They take care of our citizens' children, look after the well-being of our homes, and buy us time to earn more while setting the things like cars, pets, and our homes in order. The first speaker of the affirmative side has just told us that if we are not going to grant the permanent residency to the foreign domestic helpers, but to other foreign professionals, then we are discriminating them. However, I would say that it is illogical. Nowadays, there are several schemes to recruit different kinds of professionals, foreign professionals to Hong Kong. However, recruitment of these kinds of professionals and the recruitment of the foreign domestic workers are two different things. Firstly, quotas given to these schemes are limited, so that it would be strange to talk about granting permanent residence to over 130,000 domestic workers so easily. Besides, these professionals who are able to get the permanent residency in Hong Kong are those who are having jobs in Hong Kong that offer them a much higher salary. For example, the foreign native English-speaking teachers got at least 20,000 per month, so that they won't give financial burden to Hong Kong. And the reason behind this salary difference is that these professionals, like NET teachers, can hardly be replaced by the local ones because we have very few native English speakers in Hong Kong. Yet, comparatively speaking, the jobs of the foreign domestic helpers are more easily to be replaced by the local ones. And if you want the foreign professionals and the foreign domestic workers to be treated in the same way, you should ask them to apply the same schemes with them. Now, I will talk about some of the economic problems that will be caused if we are going to grant the foreign domestic helpers the permanent residency. First of all, accommodation of such a sudden influx of population would definitely cause a fierce competition of the low-skilled jobs between the foreign domestic workers and the low-skilled workers in Hong Kong. From June 2011 to September 2011, the unemployment rate is around 3.2% in Hong Kong. In other words, there are about 130,000 people in Hong Kong are unemployed. If we grant the permanent residency to the foreign domestic helpers, the situation will become worse. After the foreign domestic helpers have worked in Hong Kong for 7 years and being granted the permanent residency in Hong Kong, they may want to change the jobs to the which offer them a higher salary. And it is believed that they will choose the jobs of low-skilled jobs, for example, being cleaners, sales, or waiters. Besides, since many foreign domestic workers are supposed to have a higher English standards, so they are supposed to have a higher opportunity to be employed. In this way, it will cause a lot of adverse impacts to Hong Kong economy because of the fierce competition of jobs. For example, there will be more and more people in Hong Kong being unemployed, and they may become a financial burden to Hong Kong. Another problem is about the minimum wage. Nowadays, foreign domestic helpers' minimum wage in Hong Kong is about $3,580. Many families in Hong Kong choose to employ the foreign domestic helpers because of the lower salary than the local ones. However, if the foreign domestic helpers are admitted to residency in Hong Kong, they will enjoy the minimum wage of $28 per hour, just like what other Hong Kong residents enjoy. In this way, their monthly salary will be increased a lot comparing to the present level. Families may not be willing to hire these helpers anymore. And if it is the case, I don't think that granting permanent residency to the foreign domestic helpers is a way to protect them or to respect them when they get no jobs in Hong Kong, or it is very difficult for them to get a job in Hong Kong. Comparing all the above points, our side strongly believes that the foreign domestic helpers should not be granted the permanent residency in Hong Kong. Thank you.